The video game industry's budget continues to swell, largely due to the flood of in-game purchases. You trade diamonds for gold to eventually get your hands on shards, in short, microtransactions. These purchases often come across as quite unpleasant and manipulative. These practices have been known for a long time, and although the community is putting up some resistance, there is no real improvement in sight. Large parts of the industry are gradually heading toward an unhealthy, ruthless, and exploitative state. We are dealing with an industry that, especially in the US due to inadequate consumer protection, is barely regulated and will stop at nothing, not even psychological tricks. Even renowned development studios are sacrificing their integrity for highly dubious revenue models. The result is games that are little more than interactive billboards, where artistic quality and gameplay take a back seat, while the vulnerabilities of susceptible individuals are deliberately exploited. These days, countless games are initially available for free. This is likely intended primarily to lower the barrier to entry and attract users who aren't willing or able to shell out $60 to $80 right away. The studios then have to recoup their investments through other means, such as microtransactions. A common model involves purely cosmetic add-ons, such as new outfits for the character. In many cases, this is entirely legitimate. A good example here is Fortnite. There, cosmetic items are offered transparently. You know exactly what you're getting and for what price. That settles the matter. You decide individually whether to buy and can simply ignore the offer if you're not interested. Since the gameplay remains unaffected, all players retain the same chances of success. The transactions are simple, understandable, and don't disrupt the flow of the game. Unfortunately, however, microtransactions often lead to games being actively designed worse. The central question is often no longer, "We have a great game idea here. How can we turn it into a profit?" But rather, "How must the gameplay be structured to maximize revenue?" You've likely already experienced many of the following strategies firsthand. Yet it's important to take a detailed look at these developer mechanisms. First of all, many games obscure the actual dollar cost by using artificial in-game currencies. If 70 gems cost $4.99 and you can buy 16 shards with them, while a new piece of armor costs 6 shards, who can still figure out the actual dollar price? This decoupling in the store massively lowers the barrier to spending money. But that's just the tip of the iceberg. Rule number 1 is, players shouldn't be able to get too far based on talent alone. This is where pay to win comes into play. Those who invest real money gain a clear advantage through exclusive items. However, if developers overdo it, the fun of the game quickly suffers. The pay-to-progress principle is therefore often more effective. At the beginning, progress is rapid. You're constantly celebrating successes and getting stronger. But then comes the moment when everything suddenly stagnates. Monotonous tasks repeat endlessly, and you're forced to wait about 30 minutes for new resources, or you can just pay $2. Once you've taken that first step toward making a purchase, you're usually more likely to reach for your wallet again later on. In addition to confusing exchange rates, prices are often artificially inflated just to present a seemingly unbeatable special offer shortly afterward. Suddenly, $20 for some digital nonsense seems like a bargain because a hefty discount is displayed. This is what's known as anchoring. Payment options are also displayed precisely when frustration levels are at their highest, to exploit the player's irrationality in their hot state. Failed again? For 142 diamonds, you can continue right away. This leads to games being deliberately designed so that such moments of frustration occur with relentless regularity. Of course, many titles combine all these methods. Diablo Immortal is the current prime example of this. To truly push a character to the top there, you'd theoretically have to invest over $100,000. The whole thing resembles a highly complex casino with a Diablo aesthetic more than a classic action RPG. In the new Pokemon TCG Pocket, you'll also encounter overpriced collections and agonizingly slow progress when collecting cards. You're constantly lured by the feeling that you're just one pack away from completing your set, while artificial scarcity and timers ramp up the pressure. And then there are the gacha heavyweights like Zenless Zone Zero, which sell individual characters for the equivalent of hundreds of dollars. characters you'll practically never own without a massive financial investment. It's madness. Such tactics are standard in the mobile sector and are often accepted with a shrug. But upon closer inspection, this is pretty disheartening. The mobile gaming market has long been the industry's most massive sector. More and more major mainstream titles are being developed mobile first, blurring the lines between platforms. What began on smartphones has long since made its way to consoles and PCs. Let's now turn to what is arguably the most questionable form of microtransactions, one that has yet to be mentioned. Loot boxes are typically packages or chests whose random contents vary in value. When these boxes can be purchased with real money, they bear striking similarities to slot machine gambling. The psychological triggers are identical. There is the feeling of almost winning, the illusion of control, and the pursuit of losses among vulnerable players. Numerous studies show that high financial expenditure on loot boxes often correlates with problematic gaming behavior. What is cause and what is effect remains unclear, but both scenarios are concerning. For this reason, many classify loot boxes as effectively unregulated gambling. What is particularly reprehensible is that these offerings are often specifically tailored to minors and children. The situation is at its worst when the random content has a massive influence on gameplay, while the chances of actually winning valuable prizes are vanishingly small. The most prominent example of this money-making machine comes from industry giant EA with EA Sports FC 26. The game is sold annually with minimal updates for $50 to $70. At its core, the Ultimate Team mode, players build a new team every year to compete online. However, the best players are primarily obtained through packs, that is, loot boxes. To get your hands on the top stars, you either have to invest an unrealistic amount of time or spend a fortune. The Ultimate Team mode can also be found in other EA Sports series. Together, these modes generate nearly 30% of the company's total revenue. FC Ultimate Team's share alone is estimated at about 16%. If you consider loot boxes to be gambling, EA operates as a casino operator for nearly a third of its business. While some European countries have already taken action against loot boxes or banned them outright, comprehensive federal legislation on the matter is still lacking in the US. Although public outcry was at times so intense that some publishers became more cautious, this often resulted only in a more subtle form of predatory business practices. While hardly any major developer dares to be as aggressive as before, loot boxes remain ubiquitous in the industry. Another example is Genshin Impact, or newer titles like Honkai Star Rail. These adventure and strategy RPGs with their gacha mechanics are global hits. Time and again, we hear about well-known streamers who have squandered over $1,700 just to unlock a single specific character. You can see the sheer desperation there when hundreds of dollars vanish into thin air, and the almost hysterical ecstasy when luck finally smiles upon them. Of course, this doesn't directly affect the vast majority of players. Chances are good that you haven't spent a fortune on a game yourself yet. For most of us, titles with loot boxes and microtransactions are just a nuisance, and we'd rather do without them. But these business models aren't aimed at the masses at all. The industry is hunting for the so-called whales. Especially in the mobile sector, a tiny fraction of the user base, about 0.1 to 2%, generates the majority of revenue. These are people who invest thousands or even tens of thousands of dollars. There are in-depth analyses and AI-powered tools designed to help optimize games in a way that attracts these whales and drives them to spend ever-increasing amounts. The goal isn't a one-time sale of a $1,000 item, but rather to design the game so that users invest small to moderate amounts every single day. The industry's narrative often claims that these people can afford it. Science clearly contradicts this. Many big spenders are by no means wealthy, but simply addicted to gaming and spending money they don't actually have. However, since developers rarely share their data for research purposes, the full truth about the fate of the whales remains in the dark. Of course, one must not generalize. Not every studio prioritizes profit maximization at any cost. There are still next-gen titles considered absolute masterpieces, as well as countless outstanding indie productions. Many free-to-play games are also designed fairly and financed in an ethically sound manner. Nevertheless, the video game industry is growing relentlessly and now exceeds the combined revenue of the music and film industries. This is particularly evident with giants like Activision/Blizzard, which is owned by Microsoft. In less than a decade, microtransactions and subscriptions have become the company's mainstay. The temptation to monetize games to the extreme is strong, simply because it works. Titles like Zenless Zone Zero are enjoying enormous financial success and have brought the gacha model to consoles on a massive scale. Other publishers will try to replicate this success. For EA, Ultimate Team is so financially vital that fundamental changes to the mode are practically out of the question. The question of sustainability remains. Can games rely in the long term on financially squeezing a small group of people? At least in these extreme cases, self-regulation through spending limits would be desirable. Furthermore, a debate on age restrictions for loot boxes and transparent pricing in real money is unavoidable. Ultimately, the question is, what are video games really supposed to be? A medium for questionable money-making schemes? A tool for preying on vulnerable people as whales? Or are they, after all, works of art and products that are truly worth their price? Fortunately, not everything is heading toward the loot box abyss. Even if many popular titles might give that impression, the world of gaming is vast, and you still have the freedom to find amazing experiences outside of these corridors. If this video has opened your eyes, please feel free to subscribe and leave a like. It won't cost you a single diamond and helps me out enormously. See you in the next video. Take care.